Hey everyone, today we're going to be working on number 7, system notes, solving systems by elimination. And this is just going to be one-step elimination. Okay, so there are three ways you can do this. So if there's infinitely many solutions, you're going to get your let me get my pencil going here. Your variables cancel. And then what is left is equal. So if what you have on your right side and your left side are the same number, that would be infinitely many solutions. If it's a no solution problem, your like variables are going to cancel, but what's left is not equal. So they will not be equal. So let's look at a couple of these. So just like in yesterday's work, if we have a variable, so our x or our y, and we have a positive and a negative, those turn into 0, so they kind of cancel each other out. So how we did that yesterday is we put this little line right here, and then we did plus, okay? So I have a positive 6x and I have a negative 6x. Because it's the same letter, and you have a positive of the same number and a negative of the same number, that cancels out. So I'm going to cancel those 6's out, okay? So I'm going to look at my y's. Now I have a positive 3y and a negative 3y. So again, a positive 3 and a negative 3, that cancels out. So I'm going to cancel that one out. So if I'm doing my left side and my right side, and I canceled everything on my left side, that's going to be a 0. There's nothing left over there. So now I'm going to look on my right side, and I have 12 minus 24. Well, if I had 12 minus 24, that's going to give me a negative 12. Okay, so you have to think to yourself, does 0 equal negative 12? Well, no, 0 doesn't equal negative 12, so this one's going to be a no solution problem. What's on both sides of the equal signs are different numbers. So now let's go ahead and look at number 2. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to put this line right here, and we want to add straight down. I'm looking for a positive and a negative of the same number. So I have a positive 2x and I have a negative 2x. So those two cancel out. And then I have a positive 6y and a negative 6y. So those two cancel out. So when I'm on my left side of my equal sign and there's nothing left on there, that's going to be a 0. My equals goes in the middle. And then if I have 14 and I subtract 14, that also equals 0. So does 0 equal 0? Well, yeah, 0 equals 0. Those are the same numbers. So I'm going to have infinitely many solutions for this one. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 0 equals 0. It could be 6 equals 6, or 12 equals 12, or negative 8 equals negative 8. As long as you have the positive, or sorry, not positive, negative, as long as you have the same number on both sides of the equal sign, that's going to be infinitely many solutions. Okay? So now we're going to work on steps to solving equations using elimination. The first thing you're going to do is multiply one or both equations by a number so a variable cancels. So just like we did before, all of your variables, you had one of yours that was positive and one of yours that was negative, and they were the same number, so they just automatically canceled out. Today, we're going to work on how can we get them, if they're not the same, with a positive and a negative, to cancel them out. Okay, so once you multiply, then you're going to add the equations just like we did before together, and one of your variables should cancel. You're going to solve for the remaining variable, and then you're going to substitute the value into the original equation and solve for the other variables. Okay, so let's try this one. Okay, so when I look at this first one, I have x plus 2y equals 10, and I have a x plus y equals 6. When I look at that, if I look at my x's, so really this one has a 1 in front of it, and this one also has a 1 in front of it. So both of them have a positive 1, but remember, if we want to cancel things out, one has to be positive and one has to be negative. Well, I can make one of those a negative 1 by multiplying that whole equation by a negative 1. So I'm going to multiply this whole bottom equation. So I'm going to put parentheses around it. I'm going to put a negative 1 in front of it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just rewrite that top one again, just so I can see it better. So I'm going to put that one, 1x plus 2y equals 10. And then I'm going to rewrite this next one with this negative 1 distributing to each piece. So if I take negative 1 and I distribute it to that positive 1x, I get a negative 1x. So now I'm going to put a negative 1x right under there. Okay, now I'm going to take that negative 1 and distribute it to this positive y, remember if there's no number in front of the y, it's really a 1. So negative 1 times 1 is going to give me a negative 1y. Oops, I'm going to change that to black because there's no need to be red right now. And then I'm going to take a negative 1 and all the way past that equal sign, and I'm going to get a negative 6. So negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. So I'm going to say equals negative 6. And now we're just going to do like what we did before. We put our equals bar under there. I put my adding right here just because we're adding straight down, or you can just, if it says a negative in front, you could just subtract those two numbers too. Okay, so which one of those could we cancel because it's the same number, positive and negative? Well, I see my x's. I have a positive 1x and I have a negative 1x. So I'm going to cancel those guys out. So those are no longer there. I'm going to draw a line down there on my equals. So now I have a positive 2 minus 1y. So 2y minus 1y. That's going to give me 1y. And I'm going to say equals 10 minus 6 is 4. I could say 10 plus a negative 6. Or I can say 10 minus 6, and that gives me the same answer. Okay, so 1y equals 4. Now I see a lot of kids doing this. Oh, I see a number in front of my y, so I'm going to divide by 1, divide by 1. You don't have to do that. If it's a 1, you just leave it the same, and you could just say y equals 4, because that's not going to change the answer at all. If I take 4 and I divide it by 1, I still get 4. Okay, so this is what you did yesterday, where you solved for y, and now we're just going to go ahead and plug in for one of our equations. So now I'm going to erase just so I can see what the original equation was. And because it's a y, I might go and find the y that's all by itself. This y is all by itself, and plug that in for that y. So now I have x plus, and my y was 4, so I'm going to keep it a 4, equals 6. So we just did this bottom one right here. So I just rewrote that, but when I got to that y, instead of writing y, I wrote that 4. And I think yesterday I made them a different color. So I'm going to make that a green 4. Okay, so now I have x plus 4, whoops, equals 6. I guess I didn't need to do that. Now I'm going to solve for my x. So I just rewrote that twice because that green was throwing me off, and that's okay. Okay, x plus 4. So to get rid of plus 4, I'm going to subtract 4 on my left side. If I subtract 4 on my left, I'm going to subtract 4 on my right. So now I have x, the only thing that's left because those 4's are gone, equals 6 minus 4 is 2. So now my pair, my coordinate pair, is going to be 2, 4. I write my x first and then my y. So my x and my y. So this is what we're looking for. Okay, let's try number 4. Okay, I'm looking at the same thing. I have 2x plus y equals 4 and 3x plus y equals 8. When I look at both of those, I know I have 1y right here and 1y right here, but they're both positive, so we can't cancel them out. So I'm going to take this whole top thing, so all of this, and I'm going to multiply it by a negative 1. That will make that positive 1y a negative 1y. So first I'm going to distribute this negative 1 to that 2x, and that's going to give me a negative 2x. Now I'm going to distribute that negative 1 to that positive 1y, so negative 1 and a positive 1. If you have a negative and a positive, you always keep your negative. So I'm going to take negative 1y. And I'm not done distributing. I have to distribute all the way to the end. So negative 1 times 4 is going to give me a negative 4. So I'm going to say equals negative 4. Okay, so I changed that whole top equation, and now I'm just going to rewrite that bottom equation in here. So I'm going to say 3x plus 1y equals 8. Okay, and if you need to pause to just check and make sure like you're understanding what I'm doing, pause the video and just kind of look around and see where am I getting the numbers and why am I writing what I'm writing, okay? Here's our equals, so I'm going to do a left side and a right side. When I look at my negative 2x minus 1y and my 3x plus 1y, those 1y's cancel, so I'm going to cancel those out. So now I have a negative 2x. We typically add these, right, or we subtract them, but because that 3 is positive, I'm going to say negative 2 plus 3, and that's going to give me a positive 1x. My equals stay equals. Now I have a negative 4 plus 8, and that's going to give me a positive 4. Remember before, when you have a 1 in front of your letter, as long as it's not negative, you can just say x equals 4. Or you can leave it as 1x equals 4. Either one would be fine. So now that we have the x, we have to solve for the y. So I have to determine, so I'm going to do a little erasing here. I have to determine which one of these I want to put it in. So I'm going to use this, and it's an x, so I'm going to plug it in the x spot. So I can use my top or bottom of them. Neither of them had negatives in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and plug it right here. So I'm going to start with my 2. That's not going to change at all. So I'm going to say 2. But then it comes my x. So I'm going to use parentheses, and I'm going to put what my x is. I'm going to say plus y equals 4. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is distribute. 2 times 4 is 8. So I have 8 plus y equals 4. And then if I want to get y by itself, I'm going to subtract 8 and subtract 8. So those 8s disappear, and I get y equals 4 minus 8 is negative 4. So for number 4, I'm getting a positive 4 and a negative 4. So I would just write those with a positive 4 because that's my x, so that's coming first, and then a negative 4, that's my y, that's coming second. Okay, let's try a couple on the back side of the sheet. And do the same thing. I have 2x minus 3y equals 11, and 2x plus 2y equals 6. Well, my x's would probably be the easiest to change because they're both positive 2, so I'm going to change one of them to a negative 2. So to do that, I'm going to put parentheses around the whole equation. So there go my parentheses, and I'm going to put a negative 1 in front. And before I do anything, I have to distribute that negative 1 to each piece. So negative 1 times 2 is going to give me a negative 2. I still have my x. I'm going to take negative 1 and then times a negative 3. Don't forget about this little negative right there. So I have this negative and I have that other green negative. So a negative and a negative turn into a positive. So now this is going to be a plus in the middle. So 1 times 3 is 3y. So now it's a positive 3y. I'm not done distributing. I should have 3 rainbows. So I'm going to distribute to that other one right there. So equals 11 times negative 1 is going to give me a negative 11. And now I'm just going to write that bottom one down, which is 2x plus 2y equals 6. Okay? And I can't stress it enough that organization when you're doing these is the key. So notice all my x's are right top and bottom of each other. My y's are top and bottom of each other. And I'm not writing super big because you don't have a ton of room on this page. Okay, so when I look at these, I'm going to look, and the ones that can be canceled out are the x's. So I'm going to get rid of those x's. So I have 3y plus 2y. That's going to give me a 5y. Draw my line down right here. I'm going to say equals negative 11 plus 6 is going to give me a negative 5. Okay, y is not by itself yet, so I'm going to divide by 5, and I get y equals a negative 1. Okay, so now I'm going to take that negative 1 and I want to plug it in for a y. Let's plug it in for that top one. Okay, so I'm going to take this right here, but remember you're taking the original one. So I'm not doing anything with how I changed it where it was negative 2x plus 3y equals negative 11. I'm not using that one. I'm going back to the very original one. And this negative 1 right here, I'm going to plug in. It's a y, so I want to plug it in right here. So I'm going to write everything I can until I get to that y. When I get to that y, instead of writing y, I'm going to use parentheses and put a negative 1 in there. So I'm going to start with my 2x. Then it says minus 3. Now I'm at the y part, so I'm going to use parentheses and put a negative 1 in there. And then I'm just going to go back to equals 11. So it's the original equation. So my 2x isn't going to change. I'm going to keep that a 2x. A negative 3 times a negative 1. Again, I have a negative and a negative in 2 spots. I have one right here and I have one right here. And because we're multiplying, that negative and that negative is turning into a positive. So now I'm going to say plus, and 3 times 1 is 3, equals 11. Okay, I want to get that 2x all by itself, so I got to get rid of that plus 3. So I'm going to say minus 3 and minus 3. And I get 2x equals 11 minus 3 is 8. Okay, my x isn't by itself yet. It's saying 2 times x, so I'm going to divide by 2 and divide by 2, and I get x equals 4. So now my x and my y, I have 4, and I have negative 1. There we go for that one, number 5. Let's move on to number 6. Okay, this one's getting a little bit more complicated. So the first one says negative 1x plus 2y is negative 5. And my bottom one says 9x minus 6y equals 27. So I have a positive and a negative with both my x's and my y's. I think what I want to do is try to get that 2y to be a 6y. What would I multiply 2 to get to 6? Well, I'm going to multiply it by 3. So I'm going to take everything on the top and I'm going to multiply it by 3. So I'm going to take that 3 and multiply it by negative 1. So 3 times negative 1 is going to give me a negative 3x. Then I'm going to take that 3 times that 2, and that's going to give me a positive. It's still plus 6. 2 times 3 is 6. Y equals 3 times negative 5. So here's my third rainbow. 3 times negative 5 is going to give me a negative 15. So negative 15. And then I'm just going to carry out the next one just exactly as it is. That one doesn't have to change. Okay, so I have negative 3 plus 9. That's going to give me a 6x. Okay, a positive 6y and a negative 6y, those two cancel out, so those are gone. And if I have a negative 15 and I add 27, that 27 is positive, so it's negative 15 plus 27, that's going to give me a 12. Okay, and notice that my negative 15 is a smaller digit than 27, so notice how my answer turned into a positive answer. It should be a positive answer. Okay, so I have 6x equals 12. We want to get that 6 all by itself, so they're multiplied right now, so I'm going to divide by 6, and I get x equals 2. Okay, now that I know that x equals 2, I'm going to take this 2, and I have to plug it in for one of my original, so I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to erase what I got there. Could be the top one or the bottom one. Let's go ahead and use that. Let's use that top one. That top one would actually be a really good one. Okay, so we're going to do this one right here. Okay, so really when you have a negative in front of a number, it's really negative 1. Or sorry, in front of a letter, it's really a negative 1. So I have a negative 1. So I'm going to start my equation with a negative 1. So I'm going to say negative 1. Then it has an x, and x is what I found, so I want to replace that with my 2. And then I'm just going to follow it out. So it says plus 2y equals negative 5. So plus 2y equals negative 5. First thing I'm going to do is distribute. So negative 1 times 2 is going to give me a negative 2 plus 2y equals negative 5. I want my 2y left for the last thing because that has the letter on it. So I'm going to get rid of my minus 2. So I'm going to say plus 2 plus 2. I get 2y equals negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. Okay. Now to get that y all by itself, I'm going to divide by 2 and divide by 2. And I get y equals 1.5. And it's not just 1.5. It's going to be a negative. Get that in there. Negative 1.5 because that 3 was negative. So now I'm going to put them in my coordinates. I'm going to say 2, negative 1.5. And that's my solution for that one. Okay, let's look at number 7. 6m plus 3n equals 3. I have m minus n equals 8. When I look, both of my m's are positive, so I could change those to negative, but when I look at my n's, I have a positive 3n and a negative, there's no number, it's going to be a 1, negative 1. So I have a positive and a negative of the same number, so let's just try to get that 1 to a 3. Well, in order to make a 1 a 3, so in order to make that 1 a 3, I'm going to take all of that whole equation and I'm going to multiply it by a 3 because 1 times 3 is 3. So I'm going to put this 3 on the outside. I'm going to rewrite that top equation first because it was on top before, so I kind of like it there. So I'm going to say 6m plus 3n equals 3. And now I'm going to rewrite this one after I've distributed. 3 times m is 3m. Then I'm going to take 3 times -1. So 3 times -1 is going to give me a -3. And you have n. And now I need 3. Here's my third rainbow. 3 times that 8. So 3 times 8 is going to give you 24. Okay, do this. Draw my line right here. Okay, now I'm going to add straight down. 6 plus 3 gives me 9m. If I have a positive 3n and a negative 3n, those are gone. I don't have those anymore. And then 24 plus 3 is going to give me a 27. And equals goes in the middle. I have a letter and a number, so they're being multiplied. So I'm going to divide, and I get m equals 3. Okay, so now that I have that, I'm going to take this 3 and I'm going to stick it, because it's an m, I'm going to stick it in the m spot. So I'm going to erase this. I'm going back to the original equation. Let's do this bottom one because it looks like a little bit less work because there's less big numbers. There is a negative, but I think those are good to work on too. Okay, so I'm going to stick that m right where the m is. Because it's starting with my m, I'm just going to start with my m. So I'm going to say 3, and then I'm going to keep following it through. Minus n equals 8. Okay, I want to get that n all by itself. Right now it's a positive 3, so I'm going to subtract 3. And I get, don't forget about that negative in front of your n. So I have negative n equals 8 minus 3 is 5. Okay, you can't have that negative. And remember, if there's no number in front, it's really a 1. So I have a negative 1. So normally, if we have 1 in front of a number, we say leave it. But not this one. If it's negative, I'm going to divide by that negative 1. So now I get n equals 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 5. So normally we say put them in your coordinates. Well, not if they're m's and n's. You don't have to put those in a coordinate because those don't work like ordered pairs do. So we're just going to leave that as is. Okay, let's do our last one. Okay, I have 2x plus 3y equals 2 and 4x minus 12y equals negative 68. Okay, so I'm looking for anything of a letter that has a positive and a negative. And when I look at this one, it looks like my y's, I have 1 positive and 1 negative. Okay, we can't make that 12 smaller, so let's make that 3y bigger. So I'm going to take all of this, and how can we multiply by a 3 to try to get to a 12? We're going to multiply by a 4. So I'm going to stick a 4 on the outside. And then the first thing I'm going to do is distribute. So 4 times 2x is going to give me an 8x plus, now I want 4 times 3. That's going to give me a 12y equals, now I want 4 times 2, which is going to give me an 8. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 8, oops, wrong color. 8 right here. Okay, so I rewrote this one, and now I'm just going to write the other one under it. So I have 4x minus 12y equals negative 68. Okay, here's what we are used to. I'm going to add just those two. So 8x plus 4x is going to give me a 12x. These two are gone. Keep my equals in the middle. 8 minus 68, or 8 plus a negative 68 is going to give you a negative 60. And if I want to get 12 all by itself, or sorry, not 12 all by itself, x all by itself, I'm going to divide by 12. So divide by this by 12 and divide this by 12. And I get x equals negative 60 divided by 12 is negative 5. Okay, so now that I have that x, I'm going to go back to my original, one of my original ones. And let's just use that top one because you're working with much smaller numbers. So you can choose. You're going to get the exact same answer. It doesn't matter which one you plug it back in. You'll still get the same answer. So I'm going to plug that -5 in for my x value. So I'm going to rewrite this. But when I get to that x, instead of writing x, I'm going to use parentheses and then -5. So I'm going to start with 2. Now I'm at my x. So I'm going to use parentheses, -5. Close it. It says plus 3y equals 2. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is distribute. 2 times -5 is going to give me 10 plus 3y equals 2. And I noticed a mistake. 2 times -5 is going to give me a -10. So to get rid of that -10, I'm going to add 10. So I'm left with 3y equals 12. To get y by itself, I'm going to divide by 3, and I get y equals 4. So now I have an x and y, so I'm going to put them in my pairs, -5, 4. Okay, you are set to work on your assignment for number 7.